Okay, so in this video we're going to look at how to create box plots, and we're going to start with just some students here and their scores for two different tests, and we're going to go through the steps that we need to do to create a box plot. So right now we're not too bothered about test 2, we're just going to do it for test 1, right? So let me just take that and I will highlight that column just for starters. So actually let's just make it yellow. Okay, so we're just looking at test 1, and we'll go through the steps for a box plot. So the first step for a box plot is always to sort the data points in ascending order. So ascending, of course, meaning going from smallest to biggest. When you're doing this on paper, that usually means putting the smallest ones to the left and putting the biggest ones to the right. When you're working with Excel, obviously going up and down, so it actually doesn't matter whether the smallest ones are at the top or at the bottom, as you'll see in a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these data points, so just as we did in class, then right click and click on sort and custom sort. Alright, so one more time, click here, either drag with the mouse to select the entire field. If you're working with a really big data set, as we are, it's hold Control and Shift together, and then click right and down, so both of those work. Then right click, sort, custom sort, and we're going to sort the test 1 values from, actually we'll go from largest to smallest. Press OK, and there we are. And we've got all the data points sorted. Now, it's really important that when you sort, you don't just select a single column, because if you do that, all these values will change, but the names will stay the same. So you basically will be mixing up who got what score, or who earns what wage, or who is how old, and so on. So please make sure when you sort, you do select the entire table. Okay, so we've now done that. That's finished. The next step is to find the median. And the median is just the center value of our sorted list. So easiest way to do that is just to grab a pen and cross out one from the top and one from the bottom, one from the top and one from the bottom, and so on. Now, obviously, when you're working with Excel, you won't be able to do this because you don't have a pen, but you can do this just as easily by highlighting opposite cells or just doing it mentally and really being careful and checking. Anyway, so that's the last one. Oops. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can see that my two values in the middle are 93 and 93. Well, obviously the average of those two will be 93. And so in this case, just go over here. In this case, my median value, so median test 1 is going to be 93. Okay, so we're done finding the median. Next thing we need to do is find the quartiles. Now again, if you refresh your memory from class, when we were finding the quartiles, what we're actually finding are the values at which a quarter of the data points are below and the value at which 3/4 of the data points are below. So just like the median is the center point, the quartiles are the quarter mark and the 3/4 mark. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to get rid of all of this and basically start over. So to start over, right, and so what we're going to do is focus just on the values below the median to start off with. So I'm going to pick my red pen, and again I'm going to do the exact same thing. So cross one there and one there, one there and one there, one there and one there, one there, one there, one there, one there. And so my lower quartile, let me just do that one again. My lower quartile is down here, so between 80 and 85. So let's suppose I didn't want to do that in my head. I'm just going to do that. Oops. I'm going to do that using Excel. Okay, so the lower quartile, which is the 1/4 mark, so the mark below which a quarter of our values lie, is going to be between 85 and 80. So if I type in 85 plus 80 divided by 2, I get 82.5. Now, if you're working with bigger values that you don't want to retype, you could just select the cells instead, so that would work as well, instead of typing in 85 and 80. I'm going to do the same thing up the top. So this time I'll select my blue pen, and again cross cross, 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 and so on. And so my upper quartile, my 3/4 mark, lies between 95 and 95, so it's obviously 95 itself, right? The average of those two is clearly 95. And so I've got my lower quartile, my median, and my upper quartile. So my quartiles are done. Once I do that, the fourth step is to find the IQR, remembering that this stands for interquartile. Quartile. Okay, right, that's so it's actually readable. Range. Now, the interquartile range is the distance between the lower quartile and the upper quartile. So in this case, we can see that it should be about 12.5. In fact, exactly 12.5. But let's just double check. So in Excel, we can do something like, so the IQR is equal to that one minus that one. And we do indeed get 12.5, which is what we expect. So that one's done. And finally, check for outliers. And this includes finding fences. And we'll go through what that means in a minute. So just see how we go for space. Okay. So what we need to remember again from class is that the lower fence is equal to the lower quartile minus 1.5 times IQR, and the upper fence is equal to the upper quartile plus 1.5 times, oops, let me rewrite that, 1.5 times IQR. Again, they're complicated looking formulas, but they're really not, all right, as we'll see in a minute. So we're continuing on number 5. All right, so our lower fence is equal to, well, we have 82.5 is our lower quartile, and we take away 1.5 times the IQR, which is 12.5. Okay, so again, we can do that in Excel as well. So let's do the lower fence, and that will be equal to 82.5 minus 1.5 times 12.5. Notice that for times in Excel, you just use Shift 8, that little star sign, and we get 63.75. Okay, so that's our lower fence. And we do the same thing for upper fence. So the upper fence is going to be equal to 95, right, the upper quartile, plus 1.5 times 12.5, the IQR stays the same. And if we do that, we get, we'll put the upper fence here. So again, equals, select 95 plus 1.5, the time symbol, and my IQR. And so I get 114. And so the way outliers work, when we ask the question of are there any outliers, the question that we're answering is, are there any points that aren't inside our fences? So, are there any points that aren't between 63.75 and 114? And the answer, if we again get rid of all this junk so that we can actually see it all properly, the answer in this case, yes, there is, right? So 55 is not between 63.75 and 114. It's below 63.75, right? So it's outside the lower fence. So since we have something outside the lower fence, we actually have, let me pick a red color, one outlier. So 55 is an outlier because it's below that lower fence. Now, 114, obviously we can't have anything above 114. We can't have any score above 100. So the only outlier is going to be 55. So we've gone through all the steps, we've checked for outliers, and we found that indeed we did have one outlier. So we have all the data that we need now to draw a box plot. Okay, and I'm going to switch over and show you what it turns out to be. Okay, so we have our test one. So let me just move it over. So we've got our test one box plot in blue here. Don't worry about the test two for now. You can try that one yourself later if you want to have a go at it. But let me get my pen and just annotate it and show you what we have. So we found that our median, right, if we go back here, oops, not this place. If we go back to our Excel spreadsheet, our median was 93. So you can see that this middle line in the box is in fact our median, which is 93. If you remember, we found that our upper quartile was 95. So let's go back here. Well, this right-hand side of the box is the upper quartile. So it is 95. Again, looking at it, lower quartile was 82.5. Well, that's exactly where we've put the left-hand side of the box. Now, these annotations that I'm doing aren't necessary, right? So all I'm trying to show you is what the box plot actually corresponds to. When you draw your own, it just has to be really neat. So the scale at the bottom has to be very consistent, very well ruled, accurate, and the lines here have to be ruled in the right spot. But you don't actually need to label each of these because box plots always work like this, right? The right-hand side of the box is always the upper quartile. The middle of the box is always the median. The lower quartile is always this left-hand side of the box, right? So that's just what they represent. That's what they symbolize. This here is my maximum value. And that was 100. That was the highest score on the test. This is the minimum value. Now, you might say, actually, it's not the minimum value. The minimum value, as we saw, was 55. But what this does give you is the minimum value that's not an outlier. Okay, so this was 73. So in the case of both the maximum value, so let me actually really highlight this. Both the maximum value and the minimum value, those lines, right, those edges, so you've got the line and the edge, those don't include outliers. Outliers are shown on their own, like that, as a dot. So this is an outlier, and this was 55. You don't necessarily only have one outlier. You might have three. You might have two here and one here, right? So that's okay. You've just got to check that the conditions of the outlier met. That is, you've got to do these calculations for the fence and check whether there are any outliers. Now, it's really important that these calculations for the fence are included in your appendix for your box plot. Okay, so they won't go in your actual report, but they will go in the appendix to show me how you've done your box plot. The actual box plot, I know I'm showing you one that was done on computer, but the actual box plot you will have to draw by hand. Okay, so some of the other graphs as we go, you'll be able to try them in Excel. So like Excel will do bar graphs really well, will do scatter plots. It doesn't do box plots very well. Okay, so for that reason, these ones definitely you will have to draw by hand.